AITA for refusing to give my sister my wedding dress after she accidentally ruined hers 2 weeks before her wedding. So, for context, I, 29F, got married 3 years ago. It was a small, family-focused ceremony, and my dress was the one thing I really splurged on. It wasn't designer, but it was custom-made by a local seamstress. I spent months helping design it. Lace sleeves, a fitted bodice, and a skirt that my mom and I hand-sewed beading onto together. My mom passed away 6 months after my wedding, and that dress became one of the last physical memories I have of her. My sister, Kara, 27F, has always been a little more dramatic and impulsive than I am. We love each other, but we clash. She got engaged last year to her boyfriend of 2 years, and she's been deep in wedding mode since then. I've tried to be supportive, though she's made it hard sometimes. She keeps comparing her wedding to mine, asking for advice only to ignore it, and once told me she wanted to do everything better than I did. No offense. Anyway, Kara had her first major dress fitting last month. She bought her gown secondhand from an online boutique, saying it was a steal and that she could totally fix it up. I told her to be careful since alterations can get pricey, but she brushed me off. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago. She came over to my house, visibly upset, holding her wedding dress in a garment bag. She said it was completely ruined. I asked what happened, and she admitted she tried to DIY bleach the bottom of the gown because she wanted it to look more ivory than white. Apparently, she saw a TikTok about people doing it with casual dresses. Of course, it went horribly wrong. The fabric discolored, tore in spots, and the lace basically melted. She was panicking because her wedding was in less than 3 weeks, and most bridal stores wouldn't have time to rush order something new. I sympathized and said I'd help her find a place to rent or buy a new one locally. That's when she said, "Actually, I was hoping I could borrow your wedding dress." I froze. I thought she was joking, but she was completely serious. I told her no, not out of spite, but because that dress means too much to me. It's sentimental, it's custom fitted, and it has emotional value because my mom helped make it. Kara immediately got defensive and said, "It's just a dress. You already got your use out of it." I reminded her that I've kept it preserved and clean all these years, and that even if she promised to take care of it, there's no way she could guarantee it would come back in perfect condition. She started crying and said I was being cruel, that as her sister I should want to save her wedding. She tried a guilt trip. "Mom would have wanted you to help me." That really hit a nerve because she knows how much I miss Mom. But I stood firm and said Mom would also have wanted me to protect something she worked so hard on. Kara stormed out, saying she should have known I'd make everything about myself. Later that night, I got a call from our dad. Apparently, Kara went crying to him, telling him I refused to help her when she was desperate. Dad told me I should be the bigger person because it's just fabric and Kara's under a lot of stress. I told him it wasn't just fabric. It's the last thing I have that Mom and I worked on together. He said I was overly sentimental and that family should come before material things. Now the rest of the family is split. Some of my cousins agree with me, saying Kara made her bed and now has to lie in it. Others, including my aunt, think I'm being selfish and that I should let love win. One cousin even offered to pay for Kara to buy a new dress, but Kara refused, saying it wouldn't feel right after this whole ordeal. Here's where it gets worse. 2 days after that argument, I found out Kara tried to get my dress anyway. I keep it stored in a sealed box in my old bedroom closet at our dad's house. Dad called to tell me Kara had stopped by to grab some old things, and when he checked later, the closet was open. Thankfully, I'd moved the dress to my house a few months earlier because I'd been meaning to get it reboxed. When Kara found out it wasn't there, she apparently lost it and accused me of hiding it on purpose. After that, I texted her that I was done discussing it. I told her I loved her, but if she kept pushing this, I wouldn't be involved in her wedding at all. She didn't respond. Last week, my cousin sent me screenshots from Kara's private wedding Facebook group. She'd posted about how some people care more about a piece of clothing than family, and that not everyone gets the support they deserve. I didn't respond publicly, but I was hurt. Now, as her wedding approaches, our relationship feels beyond repair. I haven't heard from her in days. My dad says I should apologize for how I handled things because Kara is still upset and he doesn't want family drama at the wedding. but I honestly don't know what else I could have done differently. To me, this wasn't about the dress itself. It was about boundaries, respect, and sentimental value. I understand she's stressed, but she destroyed her own gown through carelessness. I offered to help her find a replacement, but she wanted mine specifically, maybe out of competition, maybe out of desperation, I don't know. My husband says I'm absolutely right to protect something that means so much to me, but now I'm getting messages from relatives saying I'm heartless and jealous because Kara's getting attention for her wedding. The whole situation has me second-guessing myself. Maybe I'm being too rigid. Maybe I should have loaned it and hoped for the best, even though the idea made my stomach twist. I just can't shake the feeling that if Mom were here, she'd tell Kara to take responsibility for her mistake. But I also know Mom hated seeing us fight. So now I'm sitting here wondering, am I the asshole for refusing to lend my sister my wedding dress, even though it's causing this huge family rift? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for canceling my fiancé's surprise birthday trip after he gave my ticket to his best friend. I, 30F, have been with my fiancé, Ryan, 32M, for 5 years. We've had our ups and downs like any couple, but I've always thought of us as a team. I handle most of the planning in our relationship, vacations, birthdays, family gatherings, because Ryan tends to be disorganized. It's not a deal breaker, but it's something I've learned to accept. A few months ago, I decided to plan something special for his 33rd birthday. He's been stressed with work, and we haven't had a proper trip together in over a year. So, I started saving secretly to surprise him with a 4-day getaway to Colorado. He's been talking about wanting to go hiking in the Rockies since we met, so I thought this would be perfect. I booked everything, flights, a nice cabin with a mountain view, car rental, and even a reservation for a private guided hike. I spent weeks making sure everything aligned with his work schedule. I told him we'd be gone from Thursday to Sunday, but didn't reveal where. Everything was going perfectly until about a week before the trip. Ryan came home excited and said, "Guess what? You're going to love this. I invited Chris to come with us." Chris, 31M, is his best friend since college. They're very close, and while I generally like him, he's the kind of guy who doesn't understand boundaries. He's loud, constantly makes jokes at my expense, and treats Ryan like they're still frat brothers. Every time we hang out, I end up feeling like the third wheel. I asked Ryan why he'd invite Chris without asking me first, and he said, "Well, you've been so secretive about the trip that I thought maybe you forgot it's my birthday." Chris offered to come to make it more fun. I told him it was supposed to be a surprise trip for him, just the two of us, and that I'd already booked everything for 2 people. He brushed it off and said, "That's fine. Chris doesn't mind sleeping on the couch or even sharing a room. We'll make it work." I was stunned. I said, "Ryan, it's not a group trip. It's a romantic getaway. I planned this for months." He looked genuinely confused and said, "You're overreacting. Chris is basically family. He won't get in the way." I told him there was no way I was adding Chris to the trip. Everything was prepaid and planned specifically for 2 people. Ryan got annoyed and said, "It's my birthday. Shouldn't I get to decide who I celebrate it with?" That made me so angry I couldn't even respond. I just told him to drop it and walked away. I thought maybe he'd realize he was being unreasonable and apologize. Instead, 2 days later, I got a notification from the airline that my ticket had been canceled. When I confronted Ryan, he admitted that he called the airline pretending to be me and had my ticket transferred to Chris's name. He said, "You've been so controlling about this trip. I thought this was supposed to be my birthday gift, so I made a change. Now it's perfect, me and my best friend in the mountains." I was speechless. He genuinely didn't see what was wrong with that. I told him that the trip was no longer happening because I was the one who paid for everything. The flights, cabin, rental car, all of it was under my name and my account. He said I was being spiteful and ruining his birthday out of ego. I canceled every reservation that night. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just calmly went online and got full or partial refunds wherever I could. Then I sent him a screenshot of the cancellation confirmations and said, "Your trip is canceled. You can go somewhere else with Chris if you want." When he realized I was serious, he completely flipped out. He accused me of humiliating him in front of his friend, said I'd embarrassed him as a man, and told me I crossed a line. He actually called his mom to tell her what happened, and she called me the next morning saying I was childish and that I should have just let him have fun with his friend. I told her, "Would you let someone take a trip you planned and paid for and replace you with her buddy?" She went quiet for a second, then muttered something about boys being boys and hung up. Ryan has been staying with Chris ever since. He's texted a few times saying he's hurt, that I'd ruined something he was looking forward to, and that he doesn't know if he can trust me again. That part actually made me laugh. He doesn't trust me after stealing my ticket and giving it away. The crazy part is mutual friends are divided. Half of them say he was completely out of line and that I had every right to cancel. The other half say it was just a misunderstanding and that I should have let them go since the trip was already paid for. Now I'm stuck wondering if I went too far. I get that it was his birthday and he wanted to celebrate his way, but it felt like such a slap in the face after all the effort I put in. I wasn't trying to control him. I was trying to do something kind. Instead, he hijacked it and made me feel like I didn't matter at all. The relationship is on ice right now. He says he needs time to rethink what kind of partner I am. I told him that was fine because I need to rethink what kind of person cancels his fiance's flight without permission. My friends keep asking if I'd ever take him back, but honestly, this whole thing opened my eyes. I've been making excuses for his behavior for years. The forgetfulness, the selfishness, the way he always turns things around to make himself the victim. I guess I just didn't want to believe that's who he really is. Still, part of me wonders if I escalated things by canceling everything instead of just letting him and Chris go. Maybe that was too extreme, even if I was hurt. But then again, he stole my seat on a trip that was supposed to be a gift from me to him. So, AITA for canceling my fiance's entire birthday trip after he gave my ticket to his best friend? AITA for refusing to give up my late grandmother's house to my brother, even though he has a family and I don't? I, 33F, inherited my grandmother's house 2 years ago when she passed away. It's a small but beautiful home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the place where I spent most of my childhood. My grandmother and I were extremely close. I was her first grandchild, and I lived with her for a few years while I was in college because my parents moved out of state for work. She was a huge part of my life, and when she passed, her will specifically left the house to me. For context, my family consists of my parents, my younger brother Mark, 30M, and me. Mark is married to Jenna, 28F, and they have 2 kids under 5. I'm single and work remotely as a graphic designer. My lifestyle is pretty quiet, and I've lived alone since college. When my grandmother's will was read, Mark was clearly surprised that she'd left the house to me. He didn't say anything at first, but later that night he pulled me aside and said, "You know, it would make more sense for the house to go to me. You don't even need it. You can work from anywhere." I brushed it off, thinking he was joking, but he wasn't. Since then, it's been a slow, steady campaign from both Mark and my parents to convince me to do the right thing and think of the family. They say the house has sentimental value for all of us, which is true, but that Mark's kids should be raised there like we were. They live in a cramped apartment in the city, and I get that it's tough with 2 little kids, but I've told them multiple times that the house was left to me, and I plan to keep it. The situation really blew up 3 months ago when I decided to renovate the kitchen. I posted some pictures online, and Mark called me almost immediately furious. He said I was destroying Grandma's legacy by modernizing it. I reminded him that it was my house now and that Grandma herself always said she wanted me to make it my own someday. He scoffed and said she only said that because she assumed I'd share it with family eventually. Things got worse when I found out my parents were backing him. My mom told me that I don't understand what it's like to raise a family and that if I had any compassion, I'd offer the house to Mark and his kids. I told her I've been compassionate. I've offered to let them stay for a few weeks whenever they visit, and I've even helped babysit. But she said that's not the same as giving them stability. 2 weeks ago, things escalated beyond anything I expected. I came home from running errands and found Jenna in my driveway with her car loaded with boxes. She said, "We figured it's easier to move things in now while you're still deciding." I was stunned. Apparently, my parents had told them that if they started moving in, I'd come around eventually. I told her to leave immediately, that this was not her home, and that she had no right to be there. She called me selfish and said I was hoarding space while her kids were sleeping in the same room back at their apartment. Mark showed up shortly after, yelling that I was tearing the family apart over a stupid building. I stood my ground and threatened to call the police if they didn't leave. They eventually did, but the damage was done. Since then, my relationship with my family has completely collapsed. My parents say they're disappointed in me and that Grandma would be heartbroken if she saw me turning my back on family. But the thing is, Grandma made her wishes very clear. She told me before she died that she wanted me to have the house because I took care of her during her last few years. Mark rarely visited, and when he did, he mostly complained about how sad the place felt. Still, I've started second-guessing myself. I know Mark is struggling financially, and his kids are innocent in all this. Part of me feels guilty living alone in a 3-bedroom house when they're in a small apartment. But at the same time, I worked hard to be in a position where I could maintain this home, and I've honored my grandmother's memory by taking care of it. To make things worse, my parents have started telling extended family that I kicked my brother's family out of Grandma's house. Now I'm getting messages from cousins and even old family friends calling me greedy. One of them even said, "You don't need that house. You don't even have a husband or kids." That one stung more than I expected. The truth is, I've always been the one who helps my family the most. When my dad was sick last year, I took time off work to help him recover. When Mark needed money for a car repair, I loaned it to him and never asked for repayment. But apparently, none of that matters because I won't hand over a house that was legally and intentionally given to me. My parents have since stopped speaking to me entirely unless it's to guilt trip me. My mom told me that she and my dad have lost respect for me, and Mark sent me a long message saying I've chosen possessions over people. Meanwhile, Jenna keeps posting cryptic messages online about selfish family members who let children suffer. I've considered offering to help them with a down payment for their own place, but every time I even hint at that, my parents say it's not the same. They claim that Grandma's house belongs to the family, and that I'm breaking tradition by keeping it to myself. Sometimes I lie awake at night, wondering if I really am being selfish. It's just a house, right? But then I think about how hard I've worked to make it a home, how many nights I spent caring for Grandma in that living room, and how she used to tell me she was proud of me for being independent. I can almost hear her voice saying, "Don't let anyone push you around, sweetheart." I know family is supposed to come first, but I also believe that respecting someone's last wishes matters. My grandmother trusted me to protect this house, and now it feels like everyone else is trying to take that away. So, AITA for refusing to give my brother the house, even though he has a family, and I'm single. AITA for refusing to take care of my sister's baby after she temporarily moved in and turned my home into a daycare. I, 29F, bought my first house last year. It's a small 2-bedroom place, nothing fancy, but it's mine. I work full-time as a medical assistant, and I've always been careful with money, so getting my own place felt like a huge milestone. My younger sister Jenna, 26F, has always been a bit of a free spirit. She's bounced between jobs and relationships since high school, and when she found out she was pregnant last year, everyone in the family was shocked. The father wasn't in the picture, and Jenna decided to keep the baby. Our parents live a few states away, so she's mostly been on her own. When she gave birth to her daughter, Lily, about 7 months ago, she was renting a 1-bedroom apartment. Everything was fine until she got evicted 3 months later because she missed rent. She called me crying, saying she had nowhere else to go. I didn't want her to end up in a shelter with a newborn, so I told her she could stay with me for a little while until she got back on her feet. That was 5 months ago. At first, it wasn't so bad. I cleared out my home office so she could have her own room with Lily. I even helped her buy baby supplies and groceries. But it quickly became apparent that Jenna had no real plan. She said she'd get a part-time job, but every time I asked, she said she couldn't find anything that fit her schedule as a single mom. I understood it was hard, but she didn't seem to be trying much either. Then she started leaving Lily with me while she ran errands. Those errands started as an hour or two at a time, but soon she was gone for entire afternoons. I come home from work and find her not there, just a note that said, "Can you feed Lily? She's napping. Be back soon." When I confronted her, she brushed it off, saying she trusted me more than any babysitter. I told her I didn't mind helping sometimes, but I work full-time and I'm not a parent. She said I was being dramatic. Things escalated last month. Jenna finally got a job at a salon, part-time, about 25 hours a week, but she told me her shifts were unpredictable and she'd need me to watch Lily most days. She didn't ask, she just told me. I said, "I can't do that, Jenna. I work too." She said, "Yeah, but you work days. I usually work evenings. It'll work out." Except it didn't work out because her shifts change constantly. She'd text me at 3 p.m. saying, "Hey, can you get off a little early? I have to be at the salon by 4. I told her multiple times that I couldn't leave work like that. One night, she didn't come home until after midnight. I had to wake up at 6 for work. I told her the next morning that we needed to talk. I said she had until the end of the month to either find childcare or move out. She got defensive immediately, saying, "So you're going to kick your sister and your niece out on the street?" "Nice." I said, "You've been here 5 months rent-free, Jenna. I've been paying for everything, utilities, food, baby formula half the time, and you're taking advantage of me." She cried and said she was doing her best. I felt bad and told her I'd give her a bit more time if she started contributing, but she didn't. 2 weeks later, I came home from work and found out she had invited one of her friends and her baby over for a play date. My kitchen was a mess. My couch was covered in baby blankets, and Lily's toys were all over the floor. She said, "Oh, I thought you wouldn't mind since you're always at work." That was my breaking point. I told her she needed to move out. She started yelling, calling me heartless, saying I hate her kid. I told her I didn't hate anyone, but this wasn't working. She left that night to stay with a friend, and my mom called me the next day, furious. Jenna had told her that I kicked her out with no warning, and that she and Lily had nowhere to go. My mom said, "You could have at least helped her find somewhere else to stay. She's her sister." I told Mom the truth, that Jenna had been using me as free childcare for months, and Mom just sighed and said, "She's struggling. You don't understand what it's like to be a single mom." I said, "You're right, I don't. But I do know what it's like to be an exhausted adult trying to keep my own life together. Now half my family thinks I'm a monster. My mom keeps sending me guilt-tripping texts like Lily misses her auntie. My dad is staying out of it, but my aunt told me that Jenna is living in a friend's basement and struggling. I do feel awful about that, but I also feel relieved. My house is quiet again. I can sleep without hearing a baby cry every few hours. But then I look at Lily's old room, still full of baby stuff, and I start to question if I went too far. Maybe I should have waited longer or helped Jenna find a better solution. I just couldn't keep living like that. What makes it worse is that my mom keeps saying family helps family, and part of me wonders if she's right. Maybe I should have sucked it up for a few more months. But how long is temporary supposed to be? Last week, Jenna texted me, saying she's trying to save for an apartment and asked if she could move back in just for a month or two. I told her no. She didn't reply, but my mom texted me 10 minutes later saying, "You're really going to let your niece live in a basement?" Unbelievable. Now the guilt is eating at me. I'm not heartless, but I can't go back to living that way. I'm tired of being made to feel like the villain for setting boundaries. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to take care of my sister's baby and asking her to move out even though she had nowhere else to go. AITA for refusing to let my brother and his new wife move into the house I inherited from our parents, even though they're struggling financially and everyone in my family says I'm being heartless. I, 32F, inherited my parents' house last year after my dad passed away. It's a small but beautiful 3-bedroom place in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It wasn't always perfect. My parents had a ton of medical bills and I took care of both of them for years before they passed. But it's the only real piece of stability I've ever had. I spent a decade helping them, juggling their care with my job. And when they were both gone, the house was left to me according to their will. My brother Mark, 35M, got a significant amount of money from our parents' insurance policies, since they wanted to help him pay off debts and support his future family. Mark has always been the golden child. He's charming, confident, the kind of guy who could talk his way into anything. I love him, but he's also reckless. He's been in and out of jobs, jumped between business ideas, and somehow always lands on his feet. Meanwhile, I've been the steady one, the one who cancels plans to drive mom to appointments, who stays up all night doing their taxes, who eats ramen because hospital parking fees add up fast. After our dad's funeral, Mar told me that the money he got was already mostly tied up in paying off debts from failed business. I didn't think much of it at the time because grief was eating me alive. I just wanted some peace. The house became my safe place. I moved in, did some renovations, and finally started to feel like I had a home that was mine. Fast forward to 6 months ago. Mark got married to a woman named Emma, 29F. She's polite, but clearly not thrilled about me. She's made a few passive-aggressive comments about how nice it must be to live in a paid-off house, or how some people just have everything handed to them, which is ironic because the only reason I have this house is that I spent my 20s taking care of our dying parents instead of living my life. A few weeks after their wedding, Mark called and said he and Emma had been evicted from their apartment. They both lost their jobs and had nowhere to go. He asked if they could move in with me temporarily. I hesitated because I knew what temporarily meant with him. It would turn into months, maybe years. I told him I'd think about it. I spent a week agonizing over it. On one hand, he's my brother. I didn't want him homeless. On the other hand, this house is the first thing in my life that feels like mine. I finally told him they could stay for 1 month, rent-free, while they found new jobs and a new place. I made it clear that I needed my privacy and they'd have to follow basic house rules. He agreed. They moved in 2 days later with way more stuff than I expected. Within a week, Emma had taken over the kitchen, rearranged furniture, and started talking about our house. She even changed the Wi-Fi name to Mark and Emma Home. I told her to stop, and she laughed it off like it was a joke. Then came the fights. Emma complained about my work schedule, saying I was antisocial for spending evenings in my home office. She invited her friends over without asking. Mark started dropping hints that maybe it made more sense for them to stay long-term because the house has 3 bedrooms and it's not like you're using all of them. I told him no, that I needed my space. He got defensive and said I was being selfish. When a month was up, I reminded them they needed to start packing. Mark said they still hadn't found new jobs and begged for a few more weeks. Against my better judgment, I agreed to 1 more month. That month stretched into 3. They started contributing nothing to utilities, didn't buy groceries, and left messes everywhere. The final straw came when I overheard Emma on the phone with her mom saying, "Yeah, Mark and I are basically living in his parents' house now. It's practically ours since he's the oldest." I confronted her, and she shrugged and said, "Well, it's kind of true, isn't it?" I told her it absolutely wasn't true. The house is legally mine. That night, I told them both that they needed to move out within 2 weeks. Mark blew up. He said I was kicking out family and accused me of hoarding what should have been shared. He claimed our parents would have wanted him to have part of the house. I reminded him the will was clear, and he already got his share in cash. He said I was using mom and dad's death to get ahead in life. That hurt more than I can describe. My aunt and cousins got involved after Mark told everyone I was throwing him out onto the street. They've been calling me heartless, saying family should come before property. My aunt even said that since Mark is married and I'm single, I should share the house so he can build a family like our parents wanted. The pressure got so bad that I started second-guessing myself. I offered to let them stay 1 final month if they paid rent and respected boundaries. Emma laughed in my face and said they weren't paying me to live in their family home. That was it. I told them to be gone by the end of the week or I'd start eviction proceedings. They packed up slowly and left, but before they did, Mark scratched my car door and told me I'd regret choosing walls over blood. I cried for hours after they left. Now half my family isn't speaking to me. Some say I'm cold and materialistic. Others quietly say I did the right thing, but refuse to say it publicly because they don't want to take sides. I've started avoiding family events because it's always tense. My cousin even texted me last week saying I should do the right thing and let Mark move back in at least for the holidays. I miss my brother, but I can't shake the feeling that if I gave in again, I'd lose the one piece of peace I've managed to build. Still, the guilt is eating me alive. Every time I walk through the house, I can hear my dad's voice telling me to take care of family. And every time I picture Mark's angry face as he left, I feel like I failed him. AITA for refusing to let them stay and choosing my boundaries over my brother. AITA for refusing to let my brother's girlfriend move in with us, even though she's struggling. I, 28F, have always been very close to my younger brother, Alex, 25M. We grew up in a small town, and our parents were always pretty hands-off, so Alex and I became very protective of each other. We live about an hour apart now, but we talk almost every day. I have a stable job in tech, live alone, and have been renting my apartment for a few years. I'm independent, and I take pride in managing my life carefully. Alex has always had a complicated love life. He's had a series of relationships that never lasted, mostly because he tends to fall hard and fast, sometimes ignoring red flags. About 6 months ago, he started dating Emily, 26F. At first, I was cautiously optimistic because she seemed kind and polite, but over time, I started noticing some things that worried me. Emily has had a tough past. She lost both her parents young, and I get that trauma can affect someone in adulthood, but she has a habit of leaning on people financially and emotionally without trying to be independent. She's currently between jobs, supposedly actively looking, but she often cancels interviews last minute and has made some vague excuses about bad energy at prospective workplaces. I've also noticed she constantly complains about bills, food, and rent, sometimes hinting to Alex that someone should help her out. Alex, being Alex, has always felt protective of people he cares about. He's given her money, lent her his car, and even let her stay at his apartment a few nights when she claimed her apartment was uninhabitable. I've tried to warn him that this might become a pattern, but he insists he can handle it. The main issue started last month. Emily told Alex that she was thinking about moving closer to him for work, but she doesn't have the money for deposits or first month's rent. She hinted several times that maybe she could temporarily stay with Alex until she got on her feet. Alex casually mentioned this to me, saying she might stay with me for a couple of weeks. You don't mind, right? I nearly choked. I asked him, do you even know what temporarily means to her? Because of my experience, it means indefinitely. He laughed and said, come on, it'll just be for a bit. We'll figure it out. I told him no. My apartment is small. I work long hours, and I need my space. I also don't want to enable someone who hasn't demonstrated independence. I try to be diplomatic, explaining that I'd be happy to help her financially in a structured way, like contributing to a security deposit for an apartment or giving a one-time stipend, but I couldn't just let her move in indefinitely. Alex didn't react well. He said, you're being harsh. She's struggling, and you're her only family nearby. You could at least let her stay a week or two. Isn't that what family does? I said, I'm not her family. I'm your sister. And as much as I care about you and want to help you both, I'm not going to sacrifice my home and peace for someone who hasn't shown they can take responsibility for themselves. He got angry and said I was selfish, and over the next few days, he sent me long texts about how I don't understand people like Emily, how I have luxury problems, and how he's disappointed in me for not stepping up. He also said she cried when he told her I wouldn't let her move in, which made me feel guilty for a minute, until I reminded myself that her tears were being used to pressure me. Then it escalated. Alex told our parents, framing it as me being unwilling to help someone in need. My parents called me and asked why I wouldn't let Emily stay. I tried to explain that I wasn't against helping her, I just didn't think living together was a good idea. They said I was being cold and calculating, and that sometimes family has to make sacrifices. I haven't spoken much to Alex since. He's been distant, replying in one-word messages and avoiding calls. Emily is apparently staying at a friend's place temporarily, but keeps sending Alex texts about how I could have helped and made a difference. I've been thinking about whether I overreacted. I know she's struggling, and I know Alex really cares about her, but I also know that letting her move in would create tension, stress, and probably lead to arguments or resentment. I've had roommates before, and it's stressful even when both parties are respectful. Add in someone who isn't independent and a boyfriend who won't enforce boundaries, and it feels like a disaster waiting to happen. Part of me worries that I'm being rigid or unkind. I try to be compassionate, but I also believe there's a difference between helping someone responsibly and enabling someone. I offered financial help, advice, and even temporary assistance like helping her find a short-term sublet, but that wasn't enough. Now, our family is upset with me. My parents keep saying I should put myself in her shoes. Alex hasn't spoken to me in over a week, and Emily apparently thinks I'm cruel. My friends say I'm justified, but the constant texts from Alex and his family are making me question myself. I feel like I set a boundary for my mental health in my home, but at the same time, I can't help but feel guilty. I'm trying to balance compassion with practicality, but everyone around me seems to think I'm heartless. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother's girlfriend move in even though she's struggling and he wants to help her. AITA for refusing to help my sister with her wedding because of her controlling behavior. I, 32F, have always had a complicated relationship with my younger sister, Lila, 28F. Growing up, our parents were strict and highly involved in every aspect of our lives, and Lila seemed to thrive under that structure while I always felt smothered. As adults, we've had our ups and downs, but the tension has mostly revolved around her tendency to be controlling and, honestly, manipulative. Recently, Lila got engaged to her boyfriend, Matt. When she announced the engagement, I was genuinely happy for her, but it didn't take long for the stress to start. Lila started sharing her wedding plans with me and expected me to be fully invested in every single detail. At first, I thought helping would be fine, but it quickly became overwhelming. She insisted that I help her pick the venue, dress, invitations, and even the catering, despite having her own fiancé to share the responsibilities. Anytime I offered a suggestion, she would either reject it outright or make me feel guilty for having a different opinion. For instance, when I suggested a local florist I thought was beautiful and reasonably priced, she immediately dismissed it and said, "I don't want something cheap. This is my dream wedding." I tried to push back gently, asking what dream meant to her or what her budget was, but she got defensive and said I was making everything about money again. Over time, I realized that helping her wasn't just stressful, it was emotionally draining. Every small conversation turned into a power struggle, and I felt like I was walking on eggshells to avoid upsetting her. My partner, Tom, noticed I was getting anxious and asked if I wanted to step back. I wasn't sure if I could, but eventually, after a particularly exhausting phone call where she yelled at me for not being supportive enough, I decided to set boundaries. I told her I would attend the wedding and support her as a sister, but I would not be helping with any planning. I explained that her attitude was stressing me out and making me feel unappreciated. Lila blew up. She accused me of being selfish, unsupportive, and ruining her special moment. She even told our parents that I was refusing to help out of spite. I tried to clarify that it wasn't personal against her or Matt, but she wouldn't listen. Our parents got involved and asked me to make an effort for my sister's sake. I said I would be there for the wedding itself and any pre-wedding events that didn't involve planning, but I wouldn't be participating in decision-making. My parents were upset and hinted that I was being unreasonable, but they also acknowledged that Lila can be difficult to deal with. Since then, Lila has barely spoken to me outside of curt text messages about RSVPs or seat arrangements. She has said that she's disappointed in my lack of support and has implied that I'm trying to sabotage her wedding by not helping with the planning. Matt has even asked me if I could just help a little with minor things, but I'm firm in my decision. Tom and I have talked a lot about it, and he supports me setting boundaries. He reminded me that just because she's getting married doesn't mean I owe her every ounce of my time and energy, especially if it comes at the cost of my mental health. My friends are mostly on my side, saying that a wedding is stressful enough without having to deal with family drama, but some of them think I should make small compromises to keep the peace. I feel guilty sometimes because I want my sister to be happy, and it does hurt to see her upset with me. But every time I think about helping, I remember the last argument where she yelled at me for trying to suggest a cheaper catering option and for not getting her vision. I honestly can't deal with that dynamic for months leading up to the wedding. I also can't help but feel like she's taking advantage of me because I've always been the responsible, organized sibling. Whenever there's a big family event, I'm usually the one coordinating or fixing problems behind the scenes, and I finally realize that it's draining me and I need a break. So here's the situation. I am attending the wedding, but not helping with planning or logistics. Lila thinks I'm being selfish and unsupportive. My parents are disappointed, but somewhat understanding, and my partner and friends mostly support me. I feel justified, but guilty, and I worry that this is going to permanently damage my relationship with my sister. AITA for refusing to help my sister with her wedding because of her controlling behavior. AITA for refusing to let my boyfriend pay for my mother's medical bills after he said it was her fault she got sick. I, 29F, have been with my boyfriend, Eric, 32M, for 4 years. Things were going well for most of our relationship. He's smart, funny, and ambitious. But over the past year, his attitude toward my family has been difficult to say the least. My mother, Carol, 57F, has been in poor health for the last several years. She was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure in her early 50s. She's generally careful, but she doesn't always follow her doctor's recommendations. She's stubborn, and I've spent countless hours trying to get her to take her medication and adjust her diet. Despite that, she's a sweet, loving person who has supported me my entire life. About 2 months ago, my mom had a severe flare-up of her diabetes, which led to her being hospitalized for a week. It was terrifying, and I spent every day at the hospital with her, making sure she was comfortable and advocating for her treatment. The bills started piling up fast. Hospital costs, specialist visits, and the follow-up care she needs. I knew I couldn't cover everything immediately, so I started looking into payment plans and insurance options. Eric, when he found out, immediately offered to pay for her bills. At first, I thought that was sweet, but the conversation quickly took a turn. He started saying things like, "Honestly, she brought this on herself. If she'd taken care of herself, she wouldn't be in this mess." I told him that wasn't fair. She's sick, and it's not her fault that some health issues are complicated to manage. He replied, "I'm just saying, why should I pay for someone who didn't make the right choices?" I was shocked. I explained that my mom has always done everything for me, raised me as a single mother, and even supported Eric and me when we were dating and struggling financially. I said it's not just about money. It's about family, respect, and compassion. Eric told me he didn't see it that way and that he wasn't comfortable enabling bad decisions. The argument escalated over several days. He kept insisting that if I wanted him to pay for her bills, I was effectively agreeing that her health problems were my responsibility too. I reminded him that her health is not a moral failing. It's complicated and no one deserves to be judged for being sick. He scoffed and said I was being too sentimental and that I needed to face reality about the costs. What hurt even more was that he suggested I should convince her to be more responsible if I want help. I found this insulting. My mom already feels guilty about the situation and is doing her best. I couldn't imagine making her feel worse just to appease Eric. After that, I told him that I didn't want his money if it came with judgment or conditions. I started setting up payment plans directly with the hospital, and some friends offered to help as well. Eric was visibly upset. He said I was being ungrateful and making things harder than they need to be. I reminded him that I never asked him to pay and that this was my mother, not a hypothetical charity case. Things got even more tense when I mentioned this disagreement to my sister, who lives out of state. She was horrified that Eric would say such things about our mom. She told me that this behavior is a red flag, especially if we're thinking about marriage. I started reflecting on it too. Over the years, Eric has often made sarcastic or judgmental comments about my family's financial and health struggles. I brush it off as teasing, but this situation felt different. It felt cruel. The final straw came when Eric posted something vague on social media, hinting that he doesn't support people who make bad life choices. I didn't name anyone, but it was obvious to anyone who knew the situation. I called him out, and he said he didn't think it would matter, and that he was just speaking the truth. I felt humiliated. I realized then that this isn't about helping or not helping. It's about respect. My mother deserves care and compassion, and Eric's attitude was fundamentally incompatible with that. I ended up telling him that if he couldn't support my mother without judgment, he couldn't be part of my life. He reacted angrily, accusing me of being too emotional and overreacting. He even said I was choosing a sick woman over him, which made me so angry I could barely speak. My parents and sister fully support my decision. They told me I did the right thing and that I shouldn't have to accept help that comes with conditions or condescension. On the other hand, a few of Eric's friends and coworkers have messaged me, saying I'm being unfair and that I should let him help and stop making it personal. I feel like they don't understand the core issue. It's not about money. It's about character and respect. Since then, Eric has been distant, refusing to talk to me except for short, tense conversations. I've been feeling guilty at times, wondering if I overreacted, but every time I think about it, I remember his comments about my mother being at fault for her illness. I can't reconcile that with the kind of person I want to be with long-term. So, AITA for refusing to let my boyfriend pay for my mother's medical bills because he judged her and said it was her fault she got sick? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to let my sister handle my mother's funeral arrangements, even though she claims she knows best. I, 34F, have been dealing with a lot of tension in my family recently, and it all came to a head after my mom passed away last month. I feel like I need an outside perspective because the situation has gotten ugly, and now my sister is calling me unreasonable. To give some context, my mom, 65F, had been battling a long illness for about 5 years. Throughout her illness, my sister, 36F, and I had very different relationships with her. I live in another state for work, so I would visit a few times a year while my sister lived nearby and saw her almost every day. Because of this, my sister always acted like she was the primary caretaker and decision-maker. While I helped with financial support and arranging some of her medical care, the bulk of day-to-day care fell on my sister. When my mom's health took a sudden turn for the worse last month, I flew back immediately. She passed away peacefully at home, surrounded by family. The difficult part started when we had to plan the funeral. My sister immediately started making plans on her own, telling me she already knows what Mom would have wanted and that she's been doing this her whole life. I felt uneasy about her taking complete control, especially because she had very strong opinions about the type of service she wanted, which were not things I thought reflected my mom's personality. I suggested that we should sit down together, discuss our mom's wishes, and try to compromise. I tried to stay neutral and just wanted the funeral to feel personal to our mom rather than reflect one of our preferences. But my sister dismissed me, saying I was overcomplicating things and that I'm too far removed to know what Mom would have wanted. She then went on to make most of the arrangements without consulting me, choosing the funeral home, the casket, the flowers, and even drafting the eulogy. Things came to a head when she asked me to review the eulogy. I read it and immediately felt uncomfortable. The eulogy was written almost entirely about my sister's experiences with our mom, how they did crafts together, how they watched certain TV shows every week, and how Mom had supposedly confided in my sister about her life goals and regrets. I felt completely erased from it. I tried to suggest adding some memories I had shared with Mom, but my sister refused, saying, "The eulogy is already perfect. You barely saw her anyway, so your memories don't matter as much." I was shocked by this and felt like my presence and my relationship with our mom were being completely dismissed. At this point, I decided that if I couldn't have a say in the funeral planning, I would at least speak at the service myself. I told my sister I wanted to say a few words, sharing some memories and moments I had with Mom. She immediately became upset, saying it would ruin the flow and the guests won't care about your stories. She even tried to enlist my dad and other relatives to side with her, framing it as me making everything about myself at Mom's funeral. I ended up standing my ground, insisting I would have a small portion to speak, and we compromised on a 5-minute slot during the service. On the day of the funeral, my sister had arranged for a large slideshow that only included photos she had taken with Mom, leaving out most of the pictures I had. The flowers were in colors my mom never liked, and the program of events was heavily tilted towards my sister's narrative. I tried to stay composed, but I felt deeply hurt that my sister had turned what should have been a joint effort into a showcase of herself. During the funeral, I delivered my portion of the speech, which included memories from my childhood, the vacations I took with Mom, and even small everyday moments that meant a lot to me. Afterward, several guests came up to me privately and said they appreciated hearing a different perspective, that it really felt like a full picture of Mom. I thought that was validation, but my sister was furious. After the funeral, she called me and accused me of stealing the spotlight and said I had ruined her plans for a perfect tribute to Mom. She has since refused to speak to me, except to send passive-aggressive messages about how I should have trusted her experience. Now, several weeks later, our extended family has noticed the tension, and some have subtly asked me if I handled things poorly. My friends have told me that what I did was reasonable and that my sister was being controlling. I'm struggling with guilt because I want to honor my mom's memory, not have family feuds over her funeral. Part of me wonders if I overreacted by insisting on participating and pushing back against my sister's plans. On the other hand, I feel like my mother would have wanted both of her daughters represented and remembered in a way that reflects their unique relationships with her. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to let my sister handle all aspects of Mom's funeral and insisting on sharing my own memories, even though she claims she knows best. Character count, 6,324 if you want. I can also create 2 or 3 alternative long stories in the same style that feel just as compelling, so you could have a batch ready for posting. Do you want me to do that? AITA for refusing to cover my stepson's college tuition because my husband insisted I should just do it for the family. I, 34F, have been married to my husband, Mark, 38M, for 6 years. When we got together, I knew he had a teenage son, Ryan, 17M, from a previous relationship. I love Ryan like my own child, and we have a pretty good relationship. I don't treat him any differently than I would my own child if we had one together, and I've been involved in his life since day one, helping with homework, attending school events, and even contributing to small things like his hobbies, clothes, and trips. Mark has always been more laid back with money. He earns well, but he spends freely, especially on things for himself. When it comes to Ryan, he tends to spoil him, buying expensive gadgets, video games, and brand-name clothes. I've tried to set boundaries, but he often brushes me off with "he deserves it. He's a growing boy." The issue began earlier this year. Ryan got accepted into a decent state university. He worked hard to get good grades and extracurriculars, and both Mark and I were proud. Mark immediately started talking about how I should cover the tuition since I have a stable job and savings. He said, "It's just $20,000 a year. You can afford it, and it's for the family." I was floored. I earn significantly less than Mark, but I save diligently and have a retirement plan, investments, and a mortgage. $20,000 a year would wipe out most of my savings, and I had never agreed to pay for college. I told him, "Mark, that's not something I can just decide to pay for. Ryan is your son. You need to handle this." He got upset and said I was being selfish and didn't understand the meaning of family. I reminded him that I contribute in other ways. I buy Ryan things like clothes and gifts, I spend time with him, and I help him emotionally and academically. He said, "That's not the same as giving him the start he needs in life. College is expensive. You're lucky he even has a father willing to give him a good life." I offered alternatives. We could apply for scholarships, look into federal student loans, or even set up a payment plan that Mark and I could split. He refused. He said, "No, I don't want him in debt. You'll just have to cover it. It's the right thing to do." I refused again. I told him flat out that I would not put myself in financial jeopardy for this. That was when things exploded. He started saying I didn't care about Ryan, that I wasn't committed to our family, and that I was calculating and cold. He even said he regretted marrying me because I can't make sacrifices for the people who matter. I was shocked and hurt. I explained that I do make sacrifices. I've given time, love, and attention to Ryan, and I've supported him in ways that aren't monetary. But he dismissed all of that and kept pushing. Things got worse when I told my parents and friends about the situation. They mostly sided with me, saying Mark was being unreasonable and that expecting a step-parent to pay full tuition is not normal. But some relatives, particularly those who know Mark better, said I should do it to keep the peace and show goodwill. Mark began excluding me from discussions about Ryan's college. He would call Ryan and discuss financial matters without me in the room. Ryan is confused. He likes me and respects me, but he also sees that I'm refusing to pay tuition and sometimes feels caught in the middle. I try to reassure him that I care about him and his future, but it's hard when Mark keeps framing the situation as, your stepmom won't help you, so you're on your own. Recently, Mark threatened to take Ryan out of my life entirely if I don't pay. He said, if you can't do this one thing, you're not really part of our family. You need to decide if you're committed or not. I felt like I was being cornered, and I actually started questioning myself. Am I being selfish? Am I wrong to refuse when it's about his future? I've done some research, and it seems unusual for step-parents to pay full tuition unless it's a joint decision made at the beginning of the marriage. I wasn't aware I would be financially responsible in this way. I've tried talking to Mark calmly, explaining my side, offering compromises, and even suggesting long-term solutions like contributing to living expenses instead of tuition. He refuses everything. The tension at home is unbearable. Mark barely speaks to me, Ryan is confused, and I feel like I'm being attacked for having boundaries. I'm also frustrated because I've always treated Ryan as my own, and now it's like none of that counts because I won't pay tuition. I'm starting to worry that this could end the marriage. I don't want to hurt Ryan, but I also can't financially shoulder $80,000 plus for college without risking my own stability. I love my husband, but I feel like he's crossing a line. I want to know, AITA for refusing to pay my stepson's college tuition, even though my husband insists it's the right thing for the family? AITA for refusing to let my sister bring her child to my wedding after she disrespected me multiple times during the planning? I, 31F, am getting married next summer to my fiancé, Tom, 33M. We've been together for 8 years, and after a long engagement, we finally set a date and booked the venue. I've always dreamed of having a small, intimate wedding with close family and friends, and I wanted it to be a stress-free and joyful experience. Tom and I are paying for most of it ourselves, and while our families have contributed here and there, the planning and decisions have largely been ours. My sister, Emily, 28F, has a 6-year-old son. Max, Emily, and I have had a complicated relationship. She's always been headstrong and tends to put her desires above others. Over the years, we've had multiple arguments over everything from childhood memories to family events, but I've tried to maintain civility for the sake of our parents. When we announced the wedding, I asked everyone to RSVP by a certain date. I specifically mentioned that the venue has limited seating and that we needed to know exact numbers. Emily immediately complained, saying, "You're always so controlling. Why can't Max just come? He's family." I reminded her that I wasn't trying to exclude him, but the venue has restrictions, and we had to plan carefully. She grumbled, but initially agreed to RSVP for herself, saying she would figure out childcare. About a month later, I got an email from her stating that Max would indeed be attending, and that she had arranged a babysitter for part of the day, but wanted him to be there for the ceremony. I gently reminded her that we had limited space and that we couldn't accommodate him. I offered an alternative. She could bring him for pictures before the ceremony and during the reception, but not in the ceremony itself. She replied that it was ridiculous and that I was punishing her child because of my obsession with control. I ignored it at first, thinking she'd calm down. Then the issues started piling up. Emily began sending me messages criticizing our choices, the color of the bridesmaids' dresses, the catering options, the music, even the seating arrangement. She framed each critique as concern for Max, saying things like, "Max will be uncomfortable if there's no kid-friendly food, or he'll get bored during the ceremony if it's too long." Every time I tried to explain that this was our day and that we were making compromises to include the children we could, she would escalate the argument. A few weeks ago, she sent me a long message criticizing the wedding timeline and saying, "It's selfish to plan a wedding that ignores the needs of your family. Max will never forgive you." At this point, I was furious. I told her that we loved Max and wanted him to feel included, but the venue and our budget limited us. I also explained that we could not have children wandering during the ceremony. It would be disruptive. She called me cold and unreasonable. Last week, I sent out the official invites. I clearly stated on each invite that the ceremony and reception were adult only, and that children could not attend. Emily responded with a message that was almost hostile. "You're really going to make me leave Max behind? After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat family?" I reminded her that our parents and I have always encouraged her to respect our wishes, and that we were doing our best to accommodate her and Max during the reception with a special activity corner for children. She replied sarcastically, "Oh, so you've made a tiny box for Max to sit in while the adults enjoy themselves? How generous." Yesterday, Emily called our mother to complain. Mom asked me if I would reconsider letting Max attend. I explained again that the decision wasn't personal. It was logistical and necessary for the day to run smoothly. Mom seemed torn, but ultimately said she understood. Emily, however, did not. She posted on social media, vague enough not to mention me by name, that some families are selfish and exclude children for no reason. This got several friends and distant relatives commenting, questioning my judgment, and implying I was cruel. I've tried to remain calm and firm, but the more she pushes, the more I feel like my entire wedding planning experience is being hijacked. Tom is supportive and agrees that we need boundaries, but he's worried about family drama. I'm also worried about resentment and tension on the wedding day if Max were to attend against our wishes. Part of me wonders if I'm being too rigid. I know children are important to families, and I've included a kids' activity corner at the reception to make sure Max and other children can participate safely. But another part of me feels like Emily is intentionally trying to manipulate the situation to assert control over my wedding and undermine my decisions. I've worked hard to make this day about me and Tom, and I don't want to compromise that because my sister refuses to respect boundaries. My parents are supportive behind the scenes, but Emily has already started stirring drama among extended family. Some of my cousins have asked me if I'm seriously not letting Max come, implying I'm being unfair. I feel guilty sometimes, but then I remember how many times Emily has tried to push her opinions on me in ways that feel controlling. I've considered trying to meet her halfway, like having Max attend only part of the ceremony or letting him sit with a family member. But every compromise seems to just open the door for her to demand more, and I don't want to risk her crossing boundaries on my wedding day. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister bring her child to my wedding after she repeatedly disrespected my boundaries and tried to manipulate the situation. AITA for refusing to let my brother's girlfriend move in with us, even though she's family now. I, 29F, live with my younger brother, Matt, 26M, in a 2-bedroom apartment we've shared for about 5 years. We've always been close, and when we decided to move in together after college, it made sense financially and emotionally. We get along great most of the time, share chores fairly, and have a rhythm that worked for both of us. Matt has been dating a girl, Emily, 25F, for about a year now. At first, I liked her. She's funny, smart, and they clearly care about each other. But as the months went on, I noticed some red flags in how she behaved around me in the apartment. She often tried to involve herself in decisions that were already agreed upon between Matt and me, like which bills to split or what furniture to buy. At first, I brushed it off as her trying to be friendly or helpful, but it gradually became more controlling. The breaking point came about 2 months ago when Matt and Emily started casually talking about her moving in. They didn't formally ask me at first. It was more like Matt would say, "Emily's going to be here more often anyway, so maybe she can just keep some stuff here." Or Emily would comment on how she could make the place more homey for all of us. I felt my space was being slowly taken over without my consent. I told Matt I wasn't comfortable with the idea. I tried to explain calmly. It's a 2-bedroom apartment, and having 3 people living together would complicate things financially and emotionally. I also mentioned that Emily hasn't contributed to our household so far. She doesn't have a lease, and she hasn't paid for utilities or groceries for more than a few weeks when she visited. Matt argued that it was just temporary at first, and that Emily is basically family now. I countered that just because someone is dating a sibling doesn't automatically make them family, and that I didn't feel my boundaries were being respected. Matt got upset and accused me of being unreasonably hostile toward Emily. He said he felt like I was trying to push her away, which wasn't true. I was just asking for time to figure out if the arrangement could even work. The tension escalated when Emily started leaving personal items in the apartment without asking, like a toothbrush in the bathroom, a small pile of clothes in the guest bedroom, and a few grocery items she assumed she could use. I asked her to remove them, and she got defensive, saying she was already part of this household in spirit. At this point, Matt started taking her side, and I felt increasingly frustrated. Last weekend, it came to a head. Matt invited Emily over while I was at work, and she rearranged part of the living room, moving my chair, a side table, and even some of my books into a corner so it looks more spacious for everyone. When I got home, I was shocked and angry. I told them this wasn't acceptable, that this is my home too, and that she cannot just assume she has rights to rearrange our apartment. Matt yelled at me, saying I was overreacting and making her feel unwelcome. Emily cried and said I was being selfish and controlling. I held my ground and told them that if she wanted to move in, she needed to pay rent and contribute fairly, and that I also wanted time to discuss how living together could work for all three of us, which I doubt would ever feel equal at this point. Now, Matt has been distant. He said I'm ruining his relationship and that I'm being a terrible sister. Emily unfollowed me on social media and texted me that she feels hurt and doesn't want to visit the apartment anymore. Matt keeps bringing up that she is family and I should accept her presence, and every conversation about it turns into an argument. A few friends have told me that I'm not wrong to set boundaries, but others are saying I should just let her move in, it's harmless, and that I'm being unreasonable because Matt and Emily are happy together. I genuinely feel like I'm being accused of something I haven't done. I don't dislike Emily as a person, I just don't want my home invaded or my living situation disrupted without agreement. I'm trying to be fair, but it feels like no one sees my perspective, and I'm worried I'm the villain in this scenario, even though I've only asked for respect and communication. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother's girlfriend move in with us, even though Matt says she's family now. AITA for refusing to lie to my husband's family about my miscarriage. I, 32F, have been married to my husband, Daniel, 35M, for 4 years. We met in college and had a fairly quick courtship, then got married 2 years later. For context, I've always been a very private person when it comes to health and personal matters. I don't overshare, even with close friends or family. Daniel, on the other hand, is extremely open with his family and tends to share everything with them. About 3 months ago, I found out I was pregnant. Initially, Daniel and I were overjoyed. We made some quiet plans about how and when we might tell our parents. I wanted to wait until the end of the first trimester, but Daniel was excited and suggested we tell his parents early. I asked him to wait just a few weeks because I wanted to make sure everything was okay, and he agreed reluctantly. At 8 weeks, I had a routine checkup, and it turned out the pregnancy wasn't viable. I had a miscarriage, which was emotionally devastating. I stayed home from work for a few days, and Daniel was incredibly supportive. He held me, comforted me, and stayed home from work himself one day so we could process it together. The problem began when Daniel's mother, Linda, called. She had somehow sensed something was wrong because I hadn't posted on social media. Daniel's idea of a pregnancy announcement would have been a post, which I wasn't ready for. Linda asked Daniel if everything was okay, and he told her we had a loss. She immediately started crying and then went on a long speech about how we should have told her sooner, how we needed support, and how devastated she was. Daniel, trying to be gentle, asked me how I felt about telling the family, and I said I didn't want to say anything at all. Daniel insisted we handle it delicately and suggested we tell his family we were trying, but it didn't work out this time, and maybe add that it was early. I felt like that was still oversharing. I told him I wasn't ready to discuss it with anyone beyond him. He said he understood, but then later that evening, he called his sister and mentioned that I had miscarried. I was blindsided. I hadn't spoken to his sister in months, and I certainly hadn't told her anything personal. She immediately started calling me, sending texts, and leaving voicemails asking for details about what happened. I didn't respond at first because I was still processing, but Daniel said, "You need to be honest with them. They're family. They care about you." I explained that I was not ready and that I didn't want to share the medical details, but he kept pressuring me. Things escalated when Daniel's parents invited us over for dinner. I told him I couldn't go. I wasn't emotionally ready to face his family. Daniel said I had to face them eventually and that I couldn't hide forever. At the dinner, Linda directly asked me how I was feeling and what happened. I felt trapped, and Daniel whispered to me, "Just tell them something, anything, so they don't worry." I felt cornered and then told a white lie. I said I had a health scare, but everything was fine now and I was recovering. I avoided mentioning the pregnancy or miscarriage. Daniel immediately scowled at me and said, "Why didn't you tell them the truth? You're just hurting everyone." I explained I was not ready to share something so personal and that it was emotionally traumatic. He said I was being selfish and that I needed to think about the family. The aftermath has been tense. Daniel's family keeps asking why I didn't want to discuss it, and he keeps framing it as me refusing to be honest with them. I've been avoiding their calls and visits, which makes him angry. He says I'm isolating the family and creating drama where there shouldn't be. I feel like he's minimizing my grief and prioritizing his desire to share over my emotional needs. Friends have told me I'm justified. This is a very personal matter, and no one should force someone to share it before they're ready. Others say I should have at least told his parents, even if only in broad terms, to avoid conflict. I feel torn because I don't want to lie indefinitely, but I also feel violated that Daniel shared something so personal without my consent. He's now giving me ultimatums. Either I tell them the full story, or I continue to be cold and distant toward the family. He claims he is only trying to protect me and the family's feelings, but I feel like he's betraying my trust and ignoring my boundaries. I am stuck. I want to grieve and process in my own time without being forced to put my pain on display for everyone. But Daniel and his family think I'm being heartless, which is making me feel guilty. I don't want to damage my relationship with Daniel, but I also feel like my autonomy and privacy are being ignored. So, AITA for refusing to lie about my miscarriage, for keeping it private, and for not immediately sharing it with my husband's family, even though Daniel thinks I should. AITA for refusing to financially support my brother after he insisted I owe him for taking care of our sick mom. So, this is a long one, but I've been stewing over this for months, and I finally decided to post. I, 32F, have a younger brother, Sam, 28M. We grew up in a household that was not ideal. Our mom had a chronic illness that worsened over time, and our dad left when we were teenagers. Sam and I were really close when we were kids, but things changed as we got older. I became kind of the responsible one, good grades, steady job, all that. Sam struggled more socially and professionally, bouncing between jobs and moving around a lot. A few years ago, Mom's condition took a turn for the worse. She needed full-time care, and at the time, Sam was in a bad place financially and emotionally. I was living in the same city as Mom and had some flexibility with my work, so I stepped in to help. I adjusted my schedule to take care of her, handle her medical appointments, manage medications, and basically run the household. Sam would visit sometimes, but mostly he either worked long hours or stayed at his apartment a couple of cities away. It was hard, but I didn't mind too much. I always told myself that family takes care of family, and I genuinely cared about Mom. We eventually had to hire a part-time nurse because Mom's care needs exceeded what I could handle alone. That's when things started to get tricky with Sam. He didn't really help coordinate the nurse or contribute financially in any meaningful way. I covered almost all extra costs, including paying for the nurse, medications, and home modifications. I was already making sacrifices in my personal life, socializing, career growth, even dating, because I was effectively Mom's primary caregiver. Fast forward to last year, Mom passed away. It was devastating, of course, and I tried to support Sam emotionally, even though he had been somewhat absent during her illness. After her funeral, Sam approached me with something I wasn't expecting. He said I owed him financially. I was shocked. He explained that while I took care of Mom physically, he had been handling the emotional burden from afar, and that amounted to a form of labor that should be compensated. He actually suggested I write him a check for several $1,000s for the months I had been her primary caregiver. He also implied that if I refused, our relationship would be over. I laughed at first because it sounded absurd. I asked him to clarify, and he doubled down. He pointed out that he had also been stressed and emotionally strained during Mom's decline, and that this counted as unpaid labor. I told him I was sorry he had a hard time, but I didn't owe him anything, especially because he hadn't contributed to Mom's care in a tangible way. That's when he got angry and accused me of monetizing our family and being selfish. Things got worse when I involved our father in the discussion. I thought maybe some mediation could help, but Dad took Sam's side, saying I should at least offer something as a gesture of goodwill. I refused. I felt like giving money to Sam after everything I had done for Mom would be punishing myself for being the responsible sibling. Sam then cut off contact with me completely and told mutual friends that I was heartless and exploiting our family. Since then, I've been getting mixed reactions from extended family and friends. Some say I should have just given him something to keep the peace, but others think I'm completely justified. My work life has also been affected because some colleagues knew both Sam and me and are now asking about family disputes, which makes me uncomfortable. I should mention that I'm not entirely heartless. Shortly after Mom died, I did pay for Sam's share of the funeral expenses. That amounted to a few $1,000s, which I covered up front, and he reimbursed me only partially. But when it comes to compensating him for not being there or being emotionally stressed, I just can't wrap my head around it. I feel like he's trying to rewrite history and put a price tag on what I did out of love and duty. I've considered therapy to sort through my own feelings, and I've reached out to a few friends for perspective, but I still feel blindsided and angry. I'm starting to wonder if I'm in the wrong for not giving Sam any money or if I'm justified in my stance. I want to have a relationship with my brother, but at this point, I'm not sure if it's even possible. So, Reddit, AITA here. AITA for refusing to let my husband handle our family finances after he secretly maxed out a credit card and blamed me for overspending. I, 34F, have been married to my husband, Daniel, 36M, for 8 years. We've always had a joint approach to finances. We share accounts for bills and household expenses, but we also maintain individual accounts for personal spending. Up until recently, everything was manageable. We communicate reasonably well about money, but Daniel has always been more impulsive than I am when it comes to spending. Our financial issues began about 3 months ago. Daniel started making small, unplanned purchases without discussing them with me. Things like electronics, high-end kitchen gadgets, and impulse clothing buys. At first, I shrugged it off because our budget allowed for some flexibility. But then I noticed our credit card statements were higher than usual. I asked him about it, and he brushed it off as a few things here and there and promised to keep it under control. About 6 weeks ago, I discovered something shocking. Daniel had maxed out one of our joint credit cards, over $18,000 without my knowledge. It wasn't on a single purchase, but a series of impulsive buys over several months. When I confronted him, he initially denied it. When I showed him the statements, he admitted it, but immediately tried to shift the blame. He said, "Well, we've been spending more than usual lately, so technically it's your fault too. You're always talking about things we need for the house and what we should do for the kids. You pushed me into this." I was stunned. Not only had he spent money we didn't have, but he also tried to make it seem like I was responsible for his choices. I pointed out that every household expense we discussed was planned, accounted for in our budget, and often I had suggested cheaper alternatives. None of his $18,000 purchases had my input or approval. He became defensive and said I was nagging and that he just wanted to treat the family, as if that excused the secrecy and irresponsibility. This situation has put us in a serious financial bind. We are now paying enormous interest on that credit card, and it's forced me to freeze spending in my own account, delay bills, and reconsider future plans like home repairs and vacations. Daniel keeps insisting that we can figure out and that I should be grateful that he's working to make life more enjoyable, which only adds to my frustration. Before this, Daniel and I had agreed that large purchases over a certain amount require discussion. He completely ignored that. I brought up that agreement during our argument, and he said, "That rule doesn't count anymore. I'm the one earning most of the money now, so I decide how it's spent. I earn slightly less than him, but I contribute consistently to our household, savings, and bills." His statement felt disrespectful and dismissive. After this, I made a decision that has caused a huge rift between us. I told Daniel he is no longer allowed to handle our joint finances alone. I want to oversee bills, payments, and credit card usage, and any purchase above a certain amount has to be agreed upon by both of us. I thought this was a reasonable boundary given the breach of trust, but Daniel has reacted like I've declared war. He says I'm controlling, distrusting, and that I'm turning our marriage into a dictatorship. Daniel's family has weighed in, too. When I confided in his sister about the situation, she said I was overreacting and that he's just a man and this is how men spend. This angered me because I feel like they're excusing his behavior instead of acknowledging the betrayal and irresponsibility. I've tried to talk to Daniel calmly, explaining that this is about trust and partnership, not control, but he refuses to listen. He keeps bringing up minor things I've done that he disagrees with as proof that I shouldn't dictate how money is spent. On top of that, Daniel has started secretly checking my accounts to see if I'm spending too much and accusing me of hiding things, even though I've never hidden any expenses. I feel violated, stressed, and anxious every time I check my bank statements. It's affecting my mental health, and I'm constantly worried about what he might do next. I've considered couples therapy, but Daniel refuses, saying that a therapist won't understand men's financial instincts, and that I'm making everything dramatic. My friends and some family members say I'm right to set boundaries, but I keep feeling guilty. I keep wondering if I'm being too harsh, or if marriage means letting go and trusting your partner, even when they make bad decisions. I've also been thinking about the long-term implications. If Daniel continues managing money recklessly, it could ruin our credit and savings. I love him, but this feels like a fundamental breach of trust. I've tried explaining it as objectively as possible. It's not about control, it's about shared responsibility and protecting our family. But Daniel refuses to acknowledge that his spending was reckless, secretive, and hurtful. So, AITA for refusing to let my husband handle our family finances after he secretly maxed out a credit card and tried to blame me for it. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her fiancé. I, 28F, have always been very close to my younger sister, Emily, 25F. Growing up, we did everything together, shared clothes, fought over nothing, celebrated every little success, and confided in each other about boys, jobs, and life in general. I never imagined that our bond would be tested over something like a wedding, but here we are. Emily met her fiancé, Darren, 27M, about a year ago. At first, I liked him. He was charming, seemed funny, and I could see why Emily was drawn to him. But over time, something started to make me uncomfortable. Darren has a tendency to be condescending, especially toward women. He often interrupts or talks over Emily when we're together, and sometimes even correct her in front of others, which I find really disrespectful. I thought maybe I was being sensitive or protective as her sister, but the more I saw, the more it seemed like a pattern. The real turning point came a few months ago. Emily invited me over for dinner, and Darren was there, of course. He casually brought up that he thought Emily's career choices were a bit overambitious, and joked that she might want to consider slowing down a bit before aiming too high. I was shocked. Emily brushed it off nervously, but I couldn't. I called him out politely, saying it was inappropriate to make comments about someone's career like that. Darren laughed it off and said I was being overly dramatic and taking things too seriously. Emily didn't defend me or herself. She just looked uncomfortable. Since then, I've noticed a lot of red flags. Darren often makes small jabs at Emily in front of friends and family, often disguised as jokes. He belittles things she enjoys, dismisses her opinions during discussions, and even once questioned her memory in a way that made her second-guess herself. I tried talking to Emily about it once, delicately, saying I was concerned about how he treated her. She immediately got defensive, saying I was reading too much into things and that she knew what she was getting into. I wanted to support her, so I tried to stay neutral. But as the wedding approached, it became clear that Darren wanted things done entirely his way. He insisted on having a small, intimate wedding, which turned out to mean only inviting people he personally liked. I was shocked when Emily sent me the guest list and my husband, 31M, and I were the last people on it, with a note that said, if you want to come, dress casual, nothing fancy. It felt insulting, considering I'm one of her closest family members. I called Emily, expressing my hurt and confusion. She told me I was overreacting and said Darren was trying to keep things simple. I tried to explain that the issue wasn't the formality of the wedding. It was the tone and the way he treated us and Emily. She accused me of trying to control her wedding and turn everyone against Darren. The day before the wedding, Darren made a comment in front of Emily's parents about how some people in Emily's life are too dramatic and can't handle a bit of honesty, clearly directed at me. Emily just laughed uncomfortably and didn't defend me. That was the last straw. I called Emily and told her I wouldn't be attending. I explained calmly that I love her and that I wish her happiness, but I could not, in good conscience, celebrate with someone who belittles her and makes her uncomfortable, especially when she won't stand up for herself. Now, Emily is furious. She's been texting me nonstop, calling me selfish, saying I'm ruining her wedding, and that I'm choosing a man over family. Our parents are upset too. They think I'm being dramatic and that I should just bite my tongue for one day to support my sister. My husband supports my decision completely and agrees that Darren's behavior has been inappropriate, but I still feel torn because I don't want to lose my sister over this. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her fiancé's behavior on my concerns about her well-being. I realize that Emily is an adult and can make her own decisions, but I also feel like it would be enabling Darren's behavior if I just went and smiled through it. I'm trying to be honest without being cruel, but now I feel like everyone is painting me as the villain. I want to make it clear that I'm not trying to control Emily or ruin her wedding. I just cannot condone the way Darren treats her. I hope she will eventually see his behavior for what it is, but for now, I can't be part of a celebration that feels toxic to me. So, Reddit, AITA, thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.